in Sardinia, this ancient culture, which is referred to as the Nuragic culture. And if you do any kind of investigation into the history of Sardinia, you're going to hit a wall really fast. And that wall is called the Nuragic culture, because obviously there was a culture that was advanced, that was building with megalithic stones, over 30,000 towers. That takes empire, by the way. That's not something that farmers do. And this, of course, just like all over the earth, suddenly this culture disappears and is referred to today as the Nuragic people. Nobody really knows who the Nuragic people were. There are some guesses. I think in our film we pinpoint who the Nuragic people were, and for those of you who've seen the film, you know what we're talking about. But this culture was there's all kinds of legends and rumors that come from the distant past concerning this culture. We have rumors of cannibalism, for example. We have legends and rumors of great warriors and giants, certainly of giants. And you cannot separate Sardinia from giants. It is absolutely ingrained into the history of Sardinia. And again, very little is known about this place. Everybody goes off to the Great Pyramids in Egypt, or to Machu Picchu in Peru, or to some of these other famous megalithic sites, some of these other mysterious archaeological sites. And Sardinia has somehow gone totally overlooked over the years. But I think that, and this is part of the premise of our film, that Sardinia truly does unlock the mystery of the migration of the Rephaim, the migration of the giants from what was the Levant, the Promised Land, before and after they were expelled by Joshua, who consequently they called him Joshua the Robber, because he came and expelled the Rephaim from the land of Canaan. And the Rephaim, of course, refers to, in a general sense, the races of giants that were living within the land of Canaan. There were different races of giants living within the land of Canaan. They were mingled in with regular-sized people. But certainly there were whole clans and tribes of giants living in the Promised Land before Moses and Joshua arrived with the children of Israel. And when they did arrive, they were confronted with, not only were they confronted with the giants, they were confronted with a situation that would plague Israel throughout its history, probably still plagues Israel to this day, and that is what Steve mentioned, the sorcery of the Canaanites, because the term Canaanite generally refers to the tribes, the inhabitants of the land of Canaan that were inhabiting the Promised Land. And among them were the Rephaim. The Rephaim were in their midst. The Rephaim, of course, were the giants, were the offspring of the Watchers, were the sons of the gods. They were worshipped. They were venerated by the Canaanite populace. They were the great warriors. They were the mighty men of old, as the Bible calls them. And not just the Bible, by the way. All over the world, they were known as the mighty men, the heroes. And in Sardinia, we find the same terminology being used of the Rephaim giants. These are the mighty men. The tombs of the giants were associated with the mighty ones, the great ones, who were, according to legend, in some cases buried beneath the tombs. And these megalithic tombs were literally built as conduits for communication, for what Pember would call intercourse with the spirits of the giants. And so these hundreds of these tens of thousands of megalithic towers that once existed on the island, hundreds and hundreds of megalithic tombs, we believe were fashioned by the Canaanites and by the Phoenicians. The Canaanites became the Phoenicians for communication, for intercourse with the spirits of the Rephaim, of the mighty ones. And in our film, we break this down. We talk a lot about Canaanite sorcery, and I mentioned that this was problematic for Israel after the conquest of Canaan. The Israelites were continually falling into the abominations of the Canaanites. And understand that the abominations of the Canaanites, and these are the abominations that the Israelites would commit these abominations, and then God would have to come and judge Israel severely, usually bringing foreign armies, plagues, and so forth. All throughout the history, the sordid history of the nation of Israel, after the conquest of the Promised Land. And so, what was the abomination of the Canaanites? What were these abominable practices that the Israelites kept falling into? Was it just things that were that God didn't like, bad things? Were they just breaking the laws of God, and so they were being judged? Well, yes, but it goes deeper than that. The abominations of the Canaanites was a very potent and real source of witchcraft, of demonic power, the sorcery of the Canaanites. This is the kind of sorcery that the witch of Endor used to call up the spirit of Samuel from the underworld. This is real sorcery. This is necromancy. In fact, this is where we get the modern version of necromancy, is from the abominable practices of the Canaanites. In fact, the modern version of witchcraft and sorcery and necromancy and Satanism that we see today comes essentially from the Canaanites. And again, let me remind everyone that when we say Canaanites, we're saying Rephaim, the sons of the Watchers. And of course, these are generations departed from the Watchers, because these are post-flood giants that are living in a post-flood context, that are inhabiting the land of Canaan, that are not only gigantic, monstrous creatures that are cannibals and terrorizing the land. Remember, they said of the land of Canaan that the land devours itself. There was cannibalism. It was a horrific scene in terms of the giants and what they were doing. But these were supernatural beings, partly quasi-supernatural hybrids, and they were empowered with this sorcery. They were empowered with this the sorcery of the Canaanites, which came from the Rephaim, which incorporated some of the rituals and ceremonies relating to the Rephaim, including the ceremonies, the rituals to raise the Rephaim from the dead, to communicate with the dead spirits of the giants, who there is indication, and we talk about this in our film, could actually be held in a state of some kind of suspended animation. And we have some surprising data in our film, some surprising quotes in our film regarding suspended animation.
Exist. He is regarded to being wiser than the sages of Egypt and the Middle East. I'm sure the majority of you know the story of King Solomon, when two women stood before him, claiming to be the mother of the same child. Upon proposing the idea of separating the child into two halves, he was able to uncover the identity of the real mother. Now, the story is Solomon had made a sacrifice to God, and so one night God came to him in a dream. He would then ask Solomon what he wanted the most. God gave him the opportunity to request anything he wanted: riches, women, the death of his enemies. But Solomon chose to ask God for wisdom. Pleased about this, God gave him super wisdom, and then some. As one of the human authors of the Bible, he has made several contributions to the text: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the Song of Solomon, Psalms. There is also the apocryphal Testament of Solomon. He was also credited for building the first temple in Jerusalem. Solomon at one time thought that he was the Messiah. Close, but no cigar. He was never intended to be, and besides, he had his flaws that led to the downfall of his kingdom. See, one of the things Solomon was also known for was his harem of women. He apparently had hundreds of wives, 700 princesses to be exact, along with 300 concubines. Now, I don't know how that works, but Solomon did break some rules when it came to marriage, so there were consequences to that. You see, Solomon got greedy. He wasn't supposed to take all those wives. It was in violation of God's law. But here's the thing. It's not the fact that he took too many wives. It was because of having so many wives, some of those wives began to lead him astray. He started turning away from God and started listening to his wives. One of them was even able to get Solomon to participate in the sacrificial practices to one of those lowercase g's. One of the worst ones, too, Molech. Now, this is supposed to be a very wise man, folks, but he did something Pretty stupid, if you ask me. He let his wives influence him to get involved with the lowercase g's they worshipped, and so God told him since he did not keep his covenant with him, he would strip the kingdom from him and give it to his successor. Let me ask you all a question, and I'm not trying to be funny. Solomon was supposed to be the wisest man ever, right? But does that sound like the actions of a wise man? Who's kidding who here? But I can't blame him. I mean, even angels were so captivated by women, they did something even more stupid that had a much greater impact on everything. In hindsight, however, Solomon left us with this advice. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So later on, outside of biblical accounts, Solomon was known for being a sorcerer, an exorcist of demons, along with the several amulets and medallions invoking his name, which brings us to the Seal of Solomon. According to ancient texts, there were a certain number of angels who fell. They then proceeded to breed giants. These giants became dependent upon man. Once man ran out of resources, these giants began to devour mankind, literally. But at the same time, a few of the fallen, such as Azazel and Semyaza, continued to teach men. Azazel knew weaponry, and that was his contribution to mankind. He taught the art of the blacksmith. And he also, interestingly enough, taught the art of using makeup for women. And right after teaching this to man, he went right back to hooking up with women while teaching man about war. Now, Semyaza and a few others, they took it upon themselves to teach men about enchantments, the cutting of roots, or use of herbs. They taught astrology and the constellations, all that crap in horoscopes, your sign. What's your sign? Yeah, you can thank the fallen angels for that. You know who understands astrology? CERN understands astrology. Because astrology, as much as humans have made it out to be some spiritual thing, this technology is intended for the purpose of the timing and positioning of objects in space, as well as the effects of those objects on Earth and life on Earth. It is a science before it is witchcraft. Most of these things that we consider witchcraft is actually just science, forbidden science, because you really don't know what you're doing. We don't fully understand astrology today because it wasn't meant for us, at least not at that time, because that was information given to angels so that they could do their jobs accordingly. And one of the problems is when you have something like astrology, something you don't fully understand, you have questions. And the only ones who can answer those questions, they either have to be at the genius level of intelligence or they have to be one of the fallen. And this is where summoning spirits comes in. People summon spirits or demons mainly not because they necessarily want to do evil to other people, but because upon summoning such a spirit, you can bind it, you can ask it questions, or you can make requests that are usually granted performing rituals that, in origin, were taught to man by these very fallen angels. It's the same as saying to someone, hey, you ever need to give me a call? Here's how you do it. And the problem with all that is, once you make that conscious effort to reach out to them, they all start to look in your direction. Listen, I know there are a lot of you who are listening to this right now, and some of you are into horoscopes, you're into palm reading and tarot card readings, you're into burning sage and other herbs, you don't mind a dream catcher or two, you're cool with seeing a psychic every once in a while, you feel comfortable with putting up symbols around your home, the cross included, not really knowing what they are. I know some of you participate in ancient magic traditions, and you didn't even know it. So let's talk about this seal for a moment, shall we? Now, even though this is legend, you would think that the legend came from some ancient text. And it does, from the Babylonian Talmud. You see, I'm doing this because some of you may be deep into this stuff, and I'm telling you, there are dire consequences to what you are doing. Yes, you may achieve success and money and other things by getting into this stuff, but guess what? These demonic entities always win when you summon or make deals with them. And they will always come to collect after everything is said and done. And you will suffer for it. That is what they do. Take Halloween, for example. When you participate in this, how many of you know that this is a ritual? When you dress up for Halloween, doesn't matter if you dress up as Jesus Christ, you are performing a ritual, and these demonic entities will come after your children because that is what the ritual does. And later on, when that child becomes a teenager, these demonic entities come for them. And you wonder why they become the rebel teen, misunderstood. They end up having problems in their lives for apparently no reason. And you're like, wait, I didn't bring them up like that. But you forgot the ritual you performed when you celebrated Halloween. I'm not kidding. I know this stuff, and people don't take it seriously. They think it's a joke or harmless fun. And so they remain oblivious to it. They will come to collect. They have been doing this longer than anyone on the planet has been alive. Do you see? So let me just touch on these seals. In old Jewish and Islamic occultism, the Seal of Solomon is a signet ring, usually a hexagram or pentagram. Most people recognize it today as either the Star of David, which would be Solomon's father, or in other practices, the seal is the sign of the devil or Satan. So which is it? Well, if you were to ask me, I would say yes, it's a demonic symbol. Because let me remind you all of the story of the golden calf. Many of you may not know this, but when Moses was leading the Israelites out of Egypt, to Moses, those people were a pain in the ass. They constantly complained and they constantly blamed Moses for their problems. Moses was tired of them and he kept asking God for help. And that is one of the reasons he went up into the mountains in the first place, because he needed to have law and order. Keep in mind, the Israelites at that time, they were just regular people, some of them criminals. So when Moses did go up the mountain, the Israelites began to miss him. And so they decided, hey, we need something to worship. How about we collect some gold and build an idol to worship God? And that's what they did. And they were punished for it, because they tried to replace God with an object, like the cross. And so there were consequences. Depending on who you talk to, there is more than one seal of Solomon. Some say there are 44 seals. The numbers vary. It doesn't really matter. The seals are incantations. And when they say Solomon had the power to control demons, that just means he had the power to bind them. Where do you think he learned such a thing? Because God didn't teach that to him. Do you think, given Solomon's history, that maybe it was one of his devil-worshipping wives? Now, according to legends, the ring or seal of Solomon was part brass, part iron, which had the name of God engraved on it. This was further developed by Arabic writers who say that on the brass part of the ring were the commands to the good genie, and on the iron part were commands to the evil genie. And this is the funny part. Listen closely, and I'm not making this up. The Arabs claim that Solomon received 4 jewels from 4 different angels, okay? So that he could set them in one ring to control the 4 elements. Now you all know where the idea of the infinity gauntlet comes from. Part of the legend says that Asmodeus once possessed the ring, which was intended to exorcise demons. He took the ring and threw it into the sea, which was later found inside a fish by Solomon. So later, the Arabs started calling the 6-pointed star the Seal of Solomon. It was in Western cultures where it was recognized as the pentacle, or Druid's foot. So what this all comes down to is this. The Seal of Solomon, the 4 jewels, all this stuff is all about binding spirits. And let me tell you how this works. Now, there is no right or wrong way to do this. It's always the wrong way. Every witch has his or her own method of performing the ritual of binding. There are several methods of doing it, and some are short and some can be long, taking months, depending on what the intention is. They usually start off by setting the atmosphere, by using a Ouija board, tarot cards, or burning candles, meditation, going into a trance. The idea is to get the spirits in the room. It's all a part of the conjuring. A lot of them use the Seal of Solomon or hexagram or pentagram. Some don't use it at all. Along with that, sometimes they'll use candles, herbs, tobacco, something that burns, as the smoke is used to consecrate the object or vessel. The vessel can be a mirror, a jar, a jewel, pendant, a voodoo doll. Voodoo dolls are a bit more complex because you have to make them and stitch them and stuff them. The vessel is just something to bind the spirit to, like the genie in the magic lamp. Now, the spirit doesn't live in the object, they just become attached to it. Now, depending on the purpose of the ritual, whether someone wants to put a hex on someone or banish someone from their lives or something that they want to achieve, maybe they want the spirit to do a job for them, whatever it is, they usually write down their incantation or recite it, usually on paper so that it can be burned. Oftentimes, these rituals require that you use some type of bodily fluid like saliva or urine. But most oftentimes, it's blood. And it could be just a drop of blood. Sometimes they put it directly on the object. They say their demon prayer. They may burn their incantation or not. And they may end up burying the object in the ground or in a pot or container covering it in dirt. And that usually completes the ritual. Now, the reason I keep saying sometimes or usually is because these rituals are all over the place. You will never run into someone who does it the exact same way, mainly because the witch is arrogant, extremely arrogant, that they sometimes just make stuff up. They want to do things their own way. They always think they're cute or something. They don't know what certain terminology means. They forget things. It's quite interesting. Another thing is they usually end up getting hurt in some way. Whether they accidentally cut themselves or burn themselves on a candle or something, something always happens. Maybe witches are just clumsy, I don't know. The majority of witches are women, because fallen angels love women, and they are easy to seduce. Women are easily lured into this stuff. It's just the way it is. And so they just get caught up into it. Then, for some reason, they lose their freaking minds. Start collecting spirits like they're trading cards or Barbie dolls.
Oh, my spirits are so cute. I have many spirits. I have a spirit. Her name is Mary. She likes me. She likes to lay next to me and rub my tummy.
Don't laugh. You know what I'm talking about. They do that crap. So these are insane people, folks. They don't even know what they're doing half the time. It's hilarious. They mess up rituals, and instead of the spirit binding to the object, the spirit ends up binding or getting attached to them. And all day long, they're stubbing their toe, bumping into stuff, falling down, and they can't figure out why. Sometimes they try to send spirits out to put curses or hexes on people without even knowing who these people are. Sometimes the spirit goes to a target individual and realizes that that person is protected by God. So that spirit says to itself, "That idiot, let me go back and teach this witch a lesson." And the witch doesn't care. Sometimes they get sick, they develop ailments, their teeth start falling out, they start to age faster. Karma comes after them, and many of them are well aware of this. And to top it off, they actually believe that they have control over the spirit. That's a good one. A lot of these online websites that sell jewelry, trinkets, pendants, crystals, they are often run or owned by witches. I'm not kidding. They pray over that stuff. They bind demons to it. And then you buy that stuff and bring it into your home. Then strange things start happening and you can't figure out why. That Halloween pop-up shop in your area that they magically afford to throw up once a year, you all know what I'm talking about. You ever wonder how they're even able to do this? Yeah, guess who owns the merchandise? And they pray over that stuff. They perform their demonic prayers over those costumes and candy. Yeah. See, one of the reasons I do this is so that you can all be aware of certain things. Sometimes we can bring things into our lives and homes not really knowing what they are or what's attached to them. And I will be getting into some other related topics and the origins of some of these magical items people use. So hang in there, gang. I have much more to cover in several areas. Until then, stay awake, stay aware, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all soon.